Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked through its funnel and wouldn't come out again. The engine's name is Henry. His driver and fireman argued with him, but he would not move. "The rain will spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes," he said. The conductor blew his whistle till he had no more breath and waved his flag till his arms ached, but Henry still stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him. "I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you." Then along came Sir Topham Hatt, the man in charge of all the engines on the Island of Sodor. "We will pull you out," said Sir Topham Hatt. But Henry only blew steam at him. Everyone pulled except Sir Topham Hatt, because, he said, "my doctor has forbidden me to pull." But still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Then they tried pushing from the other end. Sir Topham Hatt said, "1, 2, 3, push!" But he didn't help. "My doctor has forbidden me to push," he said. They pushed and pushed and pushed, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. At last, Thomas came along. The conductor waved his red flag and stopped him. Everyone argued with Henry. "Look, it has stopped raining," they said. "Yes, but it will begin again soon," said Henry. "And what would become of my green paint with red stripes then?" Thomas pushed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could. But still, Henry stayed in the tunnel. Eventually, even Sir Topham Hatt gave up. "We shall take away your rails," he said, "and leave you here until you're ready to come out of the tunnel." They took up the old rails and built a wall in front of Henry so that other engines wouldn't bump into him. All Henry could do was to watch the trains rushing through the other tunnel. He was very sad because he thought no one would ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again. As time went on, Edward and Gordon would often pass by. Edward would say, "Beep, beep, hello." And Gordon would say, "Boop, boop, boop, serves you right." Poor Henry had no steam to answer. His fire had gone out. Soot and dirt from the tunnel had spoiled his lovely green paint and red stripes anyway. How long do you think Henry will stay in the tunnel before he overcomes his fear of the rain and decides to journey out again? Gordon always pulled the big express. He was proud of being the only engine strong enough to do so. It was full of important people, like Sir Topham Hatt, and oh dear, why did I worry about rain spoiling my lovely coat of paint? I'd like to come out of the tunnel. But Henry didn't know how to ask. I'm going to poop poop at Henry, said Gordon. He was almost there when, whoosh! And there was proud Gordon going slower and slower in a cloud of steam. His driver stopped the train. What has happened to me? Asked Gordon. I feel so weak. You burst your safety valve, said the driver. You can't pull the train anymore. Oh dear, said Gordon. We were going so nicely, too. And look, there's Henry laughing at me. Everyone came to see Gordon. Said Sir Topham Hatt. These big engines are always causing me trouble. Send for another engine at once. While the conductor went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon, who had enough puff to slink onto the siding out of the way. Edward was the only engine left. I'll come and try. Pooh, said Gordon. That's no use. Edward can't push the train. Kind Edward puffed and pushed and pushed and puffed, but he couldn't move the heavy coaches. I told you so, said Gordon. Why not let Henry try? Yes, said Sir Topham Hatt, I will. Will you help pull this train, Henry? Oh, yes, said Henry. When Henry had got up steam, he puffed out. He was dirty and covered with cobwebs. Oh, I'm stiff, he groaned. Have a run to ease your joints and find a turntable, said Sir Topham Hatt. When Henry came back, he felt much better. Then they coupled him up. Beep, beep, said Edward. I'm ready. Beep, 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 said Henry. So am I. Pull hard, we'll do it. Pull hard, we'll do it. They puffed together. We've done it together, said Edward and Henry. You've done it, hooray! You've done it, hooray! Sang the coaches. Everyone was excited. Sir Topham Hatt leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry. But the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field where a goat ate it for tea. They never stopped till they came to the station at the end of the line. The passengers all said thank you, and Sir Topham Hatt promised Henry a new coat of paint. On their way home, Edward and Henry helped Gordon back to the shed. All three engines are now great friends. Henry doesn't mind the rain now. He knows that the best way to keep his paint nice is not to run into tunnels, but to ask his driver to rub him down when the day's work is over. Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else. He likes every part of it, from the fields filled with flowers to the white sandy beaches. But there is one place that Henry always enjoyed visiting more than any other. His driver knew this too. "Come on, Henry," he would sometimes say. "We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest." Henry loved it here. The forest was full of broad oaks and tall pines. Henry could remember the day long ago when he and Toby brought some new trees to be planted, and Terence and Trevor helped haul them into place. Now he could see the trees growing amongst the others on the hillside. Henry always felt better for being here. He couldn't really explain why, but his driver understood. "It's peaceful," he said to Henry. But one night, everything changed. The engines were resting in the shed. "Listen," said Thomas. "Can you hear a strange whistling sound?" "It's the wind blowing outside our shed," replied Toby, "but I've never heard it like this before." "Do you know," added James, "if Gordon wasn't here now, I'd say it was him thundering by with the express." All the engines laughed, except Henry. "I hope the wind won't harm the forest." By morning, the fierce winds had gone, but the damage was done. Henry's driver came to see him in the yard. "Trees have fallen on the line," he said. "We must help clear the tracks." Donald set off with the breakdown train, and Henry followed. Trees lay everywhere. The hillside now looked so bare. Henry felt sad. "What will happen to all the animals who live here?" he thought. When Henry's flat cars were full of logs, he took them to the timber mill where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Henry was glad the wood was being put to good use, but he was still sorry to lose part of his forest. "Oh dear," sighed Toby to Thomas. "I wish there was something we could do to make things better again." "Yes, indeed," replied Thomas. "But what? We can't mend broken trees." "Hello, Toby," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You do look glum." "I'm sad about the trees," said Toby. "And so is Henry. The forest is a special place to him. Now some of it is gone." "We'll soon put that right," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "I have an important job for you, Toby. I would like you to take some freight cars to the forest." When the freight cars arrived, Toby was delighted. They were full of splendid young trees all ready for planting. "This is the best job I've ever had," said Toby happily. When Henry returned, he was most surprised. There were Terence and Trevor busily helping the workmen clear the torn stumps and branches. "Look, Henry," called Terence, "we're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see." Now, whenever Henry stops by the forest, he can see the new trees growing strong and tall. Sometimes everywhere is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here. One morning, Henry was feeling very sorry for himself. Sometimes he could pull trains, but sometimes he felt he had no strength at all. I suffered dreadfully and no one cares. Rubbish, Henry, snorted James. You don't work hard enough. Sir Topham Hatt spoke to him too. What's wrong with you, Henry? You have had lots of new parts and new paint too, but they've done you no good. If we can't make you better, we must get another engine instead of you to do the work. This made Henry, his driver, and fireman very sad. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting when Henry came to the platform. He had taken off his hat and coat and put on overalls. Henry managed to start, but his fireman was not satisfied. Henry is a bad steamer, he said to Sir Topham Hatt. I build up his fire, but it doesn't give enough heat. Henry tried very hard, but it was no good. He didn't have enough steam and came to a stop outside Edward's station. Oh dear, thought Henry. I shall have to go away. Oh dear, oh dear. All he could do was to go slowly onto a siding, and Edward took charge of the train. Sir Topham Hatt and the fireman went on discussing Henry's troubles. What do you think is wrong, fireman? Asked Sir Topham Hatt. Excuse me, sir, he answered, but the fact is the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately, and today it's worse. The other engines can manage. They have big fireboxes. Henry's is small and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine. It's expensive, said Sir Topham Hatt, but Henry must have a fair chance. Jane shall go and fetch some. When the Welsh coal came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited. Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow. They carefully made his fire, putting large lumps of coal like a wall round the outside. Then the glowing middle part was covered with smaller lumps. You're spoiling my fire, complained Henry. Wait and see, said the fireman. We'll have a roaring fire just when we want it. The fireman was right. When Henry reached the platform, the water was boiling nicely, and he had to let off steam. How are you, Henry? Beep, beep, beep. I feel fine. Have you a good fire, driver? Never better, sir, and plenty of steam. No record breaking, warned Sir Topham Hatt. Don't push him too hard. Henry won't need pushing, sir. I'll have to hold him back. Henry had a lovely day. He had never felt so well in his life. He wanted to go fast, but his driver wouldn't let him. Steady, old fellow, he would say. There's plenty of time. They arrived early at the station. Thomas puffed in. Where have you been, lazy bones? Asked Henry. Oh, I can't wait for dawdling tank engines like you. Goodbye. Whoosh! Said Thomas to the coaches. Have you ever seen anything like it? Both Annie and Clarabelle agreed that they never had. One winter evening, Henry's driver said, "We'll be out early tomorrow. We've got to take the Flying Kipper. Don't tell Gordon, but I think if we pull the Kipper nicely, Sir Topham Hatt will let us pull the Express. The special coal they gave you is working well." "Hooray!" cried Henry. "That will be lovely." All kinds of ships use the harbor at the big station by the sea. There are passenger ships, cargo ships, and fishing boats also come here. They unload their fish on the quay. Some of it goes to shops in the town, and the rest in a special train to other places far away. This is the train the railwaymen call the Flying Kipper. Henry was ready at 5 o'clock. There was snow and frost. Men hustled and shouted, loading up the crates of fish. The last door banged, the guard showed his green lamp, and the Flying Kipper was ready to go. Come on, don't be silly, puffed Henry to the freight cars. The cars shuddered and groaned. Trickety-trock, all right. That's better, puffed Henry. Clouds of smoke and steam poured from his funnel into the cold air, and the fire's light shone brightly. Hurry, panted Henry. They were going well. The light grew better. Signal lights shone green as they passed. Then a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. "All clear, Henry. Away we go." They couldn't know the switches from the main line to a siding were frozen, and the home signal should have been set at danger, but snow had forced it down. A freight train was waiting in the siding to let the Flying Kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the caboose. "The Kipper is due," said the conductor. "Who cares?" said the fireman. "This is good cocoa." The driver got up. "Come on, fireman, back to our engine." They got out just in time. Henry's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry lay dazed and surprised. Sir Topham Hatt came to see him. "The signal was down, sir," said Henry. "Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine, and you won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice?" "Yes, sir," said Henry, doubtfully. Henry liked being at Crewe, but was glad to come home. A crowd of people waited to see him arrive in his new shape. He looked so splendid and strong that they gave him 3 cheers. "Beep, beep," he whistled. "Thank you very much." I'm sorry to say that a lot of little children are often late for school because they wait to see Henry go by. They often see him pulling the express. He does it so well that Gordon is jealous. But that's another story. Gordon was cross. "Why should Henry have a new shape?" he grumbled. "A shape good enough for me is good enough for him. He goes gallivanting off, leaving us to do his work, and comes back saying how happy he feels. It's disgraceful. And there's another thing. Henry whistles too much. No respectable engine ever whistles loudly at stations. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it." Poor Henry didn't feel happy anymore. "Never mind," whispered Percy. "I'm glad you're home again. I like your whistling." "Goodbye, Henry," called Gordon. "We're glad to have you with us again, but remember what I said." Later, Henry stopped at Edward's station. "Hello, Henry," said Edward. "You look splendid. I was pleased to hear your happy whistle yesterday." "Thank you, Edward," smiled Henry. "Shh! Can you hear something?" "It sounds like Gordon," said Edward, "and it ought to be Gordon. But Gordon never whistled like that." It was Gordon. He came rushing down the hill at a tremendous rate. He didn't look at Henry, and he didn't look at Edward. He screamed straight through the station and disappeared. "Well," said Edward. "It isn't wrong," chuckled Henry, "but we just don't do it." And he told Edward what Gordon had said. Meanwhile, Gordon screeched along the line. The noise was awful. At the station, everyone covered their ears. Sir Topham Hatt covered his ears, too. "Take him away," he bellowed, "and stop that noise." Gordon puffed sadly away, but he wouldn't stop whistling until two fitters climbed up and knocked his whistle valve in place. That night, Gordon slunk into the shed. He was glad it was empty. "It isn't wrong," murmured Henry to no one in particular, "but we just don't do it." No one mentioned whistles. Next morning, Henry was enjoying himself enormously. "I feel so well, I feel so well," he sang. "Trickety-trock, trickety-trock," hummed his coaches. Then he saw some boys on a bridge. "Beep, beep, hello," he whistled. "Oh," he called. The boys didn't wave and take his number. They thought it fun to drop stones on him instead. "They've broken our glass! They've broken our glass!" cried the coaches. The passengers weren't hurt, but they were cross. "Call the police." "No," said the driver. "Leave it to Henry and me." "What will you do?" they asked. "Can you keep a secret?" "Yes, yes." "Well then," said the driver, "Henry is going to sneeze at those boys." Lots of people were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen. "Henry has plenty of ashes," said the driver. "Please keep all windows shut till we've passed the bridge. Henry's as excited as we are, aren't you, old fellow?" Henry felt more stuffed up than excited. Soon they could see the boys, and they all had stones. "Are you ready, Henry?" said the driver. "Sneeze hard when I tell you." "Now," he said. Achoo! "Well done, Henry," laughed his driver. Henry went home, hoping that next time he saw Gordon and the boys, they would have learned not to be so mean.
Thomas the tank engine puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting on the platform. He looked at his watch. "Well done, Thomas. You are right on time and really reliable." "Thank you, sir," whistled Thomas. "Ooh, right on time and really reliable," hummed the coaches. But the big engines were not feeling cheerful at all. "Where's Percy?" mumbled Henry. "He's supposed to fetch our coaches." "We get no rest," complained James. He edged angrily onto the turntable and spoke rudely to Henry. "What's the matter, Henry? There's no rain today. Stop worrying and do some work instead." "I'm not afraid of getting wet anymore," huffed Henry. "Anyway, you look silly enough to be a clown. You should join the circus." "Oh," whistled Percy. "So you've heard the news?" "What news?" "About the circus." "Percy, what are you talking about?" "The circus has arrived," explained Percy. "I've been shunting special cars. Sir Topham Hatt needs your help, too." The engine soon forgot to be tired and cross, until it was time for the circus to leave. Then Gordon and Henry were cross all over again when James got to pull the train away. A little later, Sir Topham Hatt returned. "Come along, Henry. A tunnel is blocked down the line. You must take some workmen to investigate." Pushing cars," grumbled Henry. They stopped outside the tunnel. The workmen went inside. It was very dark and quiet, but not for long. "Help!" shouted the workmen, and they ran out. "We started to dig at the block, but it grunted and moved," one said. "Rubbish," said the foreman. "It's not rubbish. It's big and alive. We're not going in there again." "Right," said the foreman. "I'll ride in the cars and Henry shall push it out." "Wheesh," said Henry unhappily. He had been shut in the tunnel for being afraid of the rain, but this was worse. Something big and alive was inside. "Peep, peep. I don't want to go in." "Neither do I," said his driver, "but we must clear the line." Oh, dear, puffed Henry. Then there was trouble. The block was indeed alive and very strong. It began to push the train backwards. Out of the tunnel came Henry, then the cars, and last of all, a large, cross elephant. "Well, I never!" cried the foreman. The workman gave him some cake. He drank 3 buckets of water and was just about to drink another when Henry let off steam. Cried the elephant. Water went all over Henry. Poor Henry. The elephant and his keeper were soon reunited, but Henry was most upset. "An elephant pushed me. An elephant hooshed me." That night he told the other engines all about it. Gordon and James felt sorry for Henry, but still teased him. "First the rain, then an elephant. Whatever will you be afraid of next?" "Never mind, Henry," murmured Thomas. "I think you were brave today, and really reliable, too." On starry nights when the moon is full and the air still, you can hear the sounds of faraway ships and distant laughter. They echo over the hills and through the valley, down calm canals and sleepy inlets. Every engine knows that these are the sounds that say the harbor is hard at work at the big station by the sea. One night, a special load of fish was ordered. Sir Topham Hatt decided that extra vans must be added to the train that the men call the Flying Kipper. The only vans available were old ones. They had not been used for a long time. Henry waited impatiently by the quayside as Duck shunted them into position. Thomas puffed by with the mail train. "Hello, Duck. Going fishing? I'd take care if I were you." "Why?" huffed Duck. "Well, for one thing," puffed Thomas, remembering his own experience, "if fish get into an engine's boiler, they always cause trouble. And for another, fish can be awfully smelly. And I know what I'm talking about. Good night." Henry grunted dreadfully. "You'll just have to put up with it, Henry," said his driver. "At least the extra load will mean you can have another engine help us up Gordon's Hill." Meanwhile, Duck was waiting at Edward's station so that he could help the heavy train by pushing from behind. Henry made good progress. When they reached Edward's station, his driver stopped the train beyond the platform. Then Henry gave a special signal. "Beep, beep, beep, beep. I need help, please." "Beep, beep," replied Duck. "I won't be long." Duck buffered gently up to Henry's train. He was not coupled on. Henry would then be able to run on without stopping when they reached the top of the hill. "Ready," whistled Duck, and off they went. Soon they reached Gordon's Hill. push hard, puffed Henry. We're doing it, replied Duck. Henry was pulling his train harder than he realized. Duck felt the weight on his buffers slacken. Then Duck noticed something else. "There's no sign of a tail lamp," he puffed. He whistled, but there was no reply. Meanwhile, Henry had noticed something too. "My train's getting heavier," he thought to himself. "I'm slowing down." Then there was trouble. No one was hurt, but a strong smell of fish hung in the air. Next day, workmen found the broken tail lamp at the bottom of the hill. Sir Topham Hatt spoke kindly to Duck. "The accident wasn't your fault. We should have checked that this tail lamp was fixed on properly. We'll soon have you in working order again." "Thank you, sir," said Duck sadly. "Thomas told me to be careful about fish. They got me in a right pickle, didn't they?"